The taxi pulled away from the curb just as the first golden leaves of October tumbled across the driveway. Eleanor Hayes stood on her front steps, her leather travel bag in hand, breathing in the crisp autumn air. 3 weeks in Maine with her sister had been restorative. Long walks along the coast, shared memories over tea, the kind of peace that only comes with age and good company. But something felt wrong the moment she stepped inside. The house was too quiet. Not the comfortable silence of an empty home, but the weighted hush of a secret being kept. Eleanor set down her bag and removed her coat with deliberate care, her practiced elegance masking the unease crawling up her spine. She climbed the stairs to her bedroom, each step measured and purposeful. The jewelry box sat where it always had, on her dresser beside the silver-framed photograph of her late husband, Robert. 43 years of marriage, and even now, 5 years after his passing, she still looked to that photograph for strength. Eleanor lifted the lid of the mahogany box. Empty. Her breath caught. The pearls her grandmother had worn on her wedding day in 1922. The sapphire brooch Robert had given her on their 20th anniversary. Her mother's diamond engagement ring. The ruby earrings she'd planned to give to her granddaughter on her 16th birthday. 3 generations of Hayes women, reduced to a velvet-lined void. Her hands didn't shake, not yet. Eleanor Hayes had learned long ago that panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. She found Lena in the living room, sprawled on the ivory sofa like a cat in a sunbeam. Her daughter-in-law's manicured fingers scrolled through her phone, rose gold polish catching the afternoon light. A cup of Eleanor's expensive English tea sat steaming on the coffee table next to a fashion magazine. "Lena," Eleanor said, her voice steady as a ship's keel. "Where is my jewelry?" Lena looked up slowly, and Eleanor saw it immediately. The smirk that played at the corners of her mouth, the glint of satisfaction in her eyes. "It's mine now." The words hung in the air like smoke. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face, but she remained perfectly still. "Excuse me?" Lena set down her phone with theatrical care. "You said I could have it when you were gone. You just didn't specify when." She picked up her tea, took a delicate sip. "You're getting older, Eleanor. You forget things. Maybe you already gave it to me and don't remember." The cruelty was breathtaking in its casualness. This woman, whom Eleanor had welcomed into their family 12 years ago, whom she'd comforted through miscarriages and defended during arguments with her son. This woman sat in Eleanor's home, drinking Eleanor's tea, and delivered her theft with a smile. Eleanor's fingers curled into her palms, nails pressing half-moons into her skin, but when she spoke, her voice was silk over steel. "Then let's see if you can live with what you've taken." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Lena's smirk faltered, just for a moment before she recovered. "Are you threatening me?" "No, dear." Eleanor turned toward the stairs, her posture regal despite the tremor that had begun in her legs. "I'm simply making an observation. Some things in life carry a weight we don't understand until it's too late." She climbed the stairs slowly, carefully, waiting until she reached her room before allowing her hands to shake. She sat on the edge of her bed and looked at the empty jewelry box, then at Robert's photograph. "What do I do?" she whispered to his frozen smile, but she already knew. Eleanor Hayes had not survived the depression through family stories, buried a husband to cancer, and built a charity foundation from nothing by being weak. She was 73 years old, and she was done being underestimated. That night, as Lena and her son Michael laughed over dinner downstairs, Eleanor sat in the lamplight with a leather notebook, a pen, and a mind as sharp as the day she'd graduated first in her class from Wellesley. She began to write. The transformation happened overnight, though no one noticed. Eleanor became what they expected her to be, a forgetful old woman, slightly confused, possibly declining. She asked Michael where she'd put her reading glasses when they sat on her head. She wondered aloud if it was Tuesday or Wednesday. She smiled vaguely when Lena spoke, as if struggling to follow the conversation. It was the finest performance of her life. While they saw a fading woman, Eleanor was gathering an arsenal. The first call was to Gerald Carter, the attorney who'd handled Robert's estate. Gerald had known her for 30 years and understood immediately when she requested a private meeting at his office. "Eleanor," he said, rising from his desk as she entered. "I was sorry to hear about the situation." She settled into the chair across from him, handbag in lap, spine straight. "I didn't tell you there was a situation, Gerald." He smiled grimly. "You don't call me with that tone in your voice unless there is one." "What's happened?" She told him everything. He listened without interruption, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You have options," he said finally, "but we'll need evidence." "I'm working on that." Her second stop was Ashford & Sons Fine Jewelers, the same establishment where Robert had purchased her anniversary gifts for decades. Jonathan Ashford the younger greeted her with genuine warmth. "Mrs. Hayes, what a pleasure. How can I help you today?" "I need to review my appraisal records, Jonathan." "All of them." His smile faded into concern. "Is everything all right?" "Not yet, but it will be." He disappeared into the back office and returned with a thick folder. Inside were detailed appraisals, photographs, and, crucially, certificates of authenticity for each piece. But there was more. "Mrs. Hayes," Jonathan said carefully, "I don't know if you're aware, but when your husband established your trust, he had us create a duplicate registry. It's a service we offer for high-value collections. In the event of theft or loss, the registry proves provenance and ownership." Eleanor's heart began to race, though her expression remained serene. "I'd forgotten about that. There's something else." He hesitated. "A woman came in 3 weeks ago with several pieces that matched your collection. She claimed they were gifts from her mother-in-law, you specifically. She wanted to sell them. Did you?" "I did not." The registry flagged immediately. "I told her I needed to verify provenance and asked her to return in a few days. She never came back." Eleanor closed her eyes. "Can you identify her?" "Better than that. We have security footage. When she saw Lena on the jeweler's screen, carrying the velvet bag Eleanor had stored the jewelry in, the pieces clicking against each other as she dumped them on the counter with casual disregard. Something hardened inside Eleanor's chest. "May I have a copy of this footage, Jonathan?" "Already burned to disk for you. I had a feeling you might need it." The third piece fell into place when she installed security cameras in her own home, tiny devices hidden in picture frames and bookends, monitoring the common areas. Gerald had recommended the company, discreet, professional, thorough. 2 days after installation, Eleanor watched from her iPad as Lena entered her bedroom. Her daughter-in-law moved through Eleanor's space with proprietary ease, opening drawers, examining prescription bottles, even sitting at Eleanor's writing desk and going through her papers. When Lena found Eleanor's personal address book, the one containing account numbers and passwords written in Eleanor's own hand, a relic of her generation, she photographed each page with her phone. Eleanor saved every second of footage. But it was the conversation she overheard that sealed Lena's fate. Michael had stopped by for dinner. He and Lena were staying at Eleanor's house while their own was being renovated, an arrangement Eleanor had begun to bitterly regret. Eleanor, playing her role, retired early with claims of exhaustion. She lay in her darkened bedroom, listening through the baby monitor she'd repositioned in the hallway. "Your mother's getting worse," Lena said. "She can barely remember what day it is. She's always been sharp, though." Michael sounded uncertain. Maybe it's just stress from the trip. Or maybe she's finally losing it. "Michael, we need to talk about power of attorney. What happens if she can't manage her affairs? She has everything arranged. The trust, the foundation. That foundation." Lena's voice dripped with contempt. "Do you know how much money she's poured into that thing? That's your inheritance, Michael. Your children's inheritance. And she's giving it to strangers. They're not strangers. They're single mothers who need... What about us? What about what we need? That house alone is worth $2 million. The investments, the accounts, Michael, you're her only child. All of that should come to you." A long silence. "I'm handling it," Michael said finally. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. "How?" "I have her access codes. Dad gave them to me years ago, in case of emergency. I've been looking into things. And and I can transfer certain assets if needed. If she's declared incompetent, we could—" Eleanor didn't hear the rest. She sat up in the darkness, hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face, not for the jewelry, not even for the betrayal, for the son she'd raised, who'd once brought her wildflowers and called her his hero, now discussing her incompetence like it was already decided. She wiped her tears, squared her shoulders, and smiled in the darkness. They wanted to see her as weak, confused, incompetent. She'd give them exactly what they wanted, and then she'd take everything. The invitation was handwritten on Eleanor's cream-colored stationery, delivered by hand to each recipient. You are cordially invited to a family dinner at the Hayes residence, Saturday evening at 7 o'clock. Dress is smart casual. Your presence would mean the world to me. Lena had wrinkled her nose when she saw the stack of envelopes. What's this about? Eleanor, arranging chrysanthemums in a crystal vase, looked up with the vague smile she'd perfected over the past 3 weeks. What's what about, dear? These invitations. Who are you inviting? Oh, just a small gathering. I've been feeling rather isolated since Robert passed. I thought it would be nice to have some friendly faces around. She touched the petals absently. You and Michael will be there, of course, and the Hendersons from next door. Margaret Chen, who volunteers at the foundation. Perhaps young Father Morrison from the church. A dinner party? Eleanor? I don't think... It's already arranged. Eleanor's voice carried a hint of steel beneath the vagueness. The caterer is confirmed. It will be lovely. Saturday arrived wrapped in the copper light of autumn sunset. Eleanor dressed with care, a navy dress with pearl buttons, her remaining jewelry, the pieces she'd kept in her bank deposit box, the ones Lena didn't know about, and her hair swept up in the elegant chignon she'd worn for 40 years. When she descended the stairs, she looked every inch the woman who'd once commanded boardrooms and charity galas at her husband's side. The guests arrived promptly. Margaret Chen brought wine. The Hendersons, David and Patricia, brought their warm smiles and decades of friendship. Father Morrison, young and earnest, brought heartfelt gratitude for Eleanor's continued support of the parish. Michael and Lena were the last to appear, emerging from the guest room where they'd been staying. Lena wore a dress that cost more than some people's monthly rent, and Eleanor's stolen ruby earrings. Eleanor's heart clenched, but her smile never wavered. How beautiful you look, dear. Are those new earrings? Lena's hand flew to her ear, hesitated. Yes, a gift. How lovely. The dinner was elegant, the conversation warm. Eleanor played the gracious hostess, guiding talk between reminiscences and current events, keeping the mood light. But as dessert was served, a perfect lemon tart with candied violets, she stood, champagne flute in hand. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. These past months have been illuminating. I've learned so much about the people in my life, about loyalty, about family. She turned slowly, meeting each person's eyes. About what really matters when everything else is stripped away. Mom, Michael said uneasily. Maybe you should sit down. In a moment, darling. Eleanor reached into the sideboard behind her and withdrew a small black velvet box. She set it on the table. I wanted to share something with you all. A mystery that's been weighing on my heart. She opened the box. Inside, on white satin, lay a single ruby earring. Lena's face went white. This is all that remains of my jewelry collection in this house. Everything else, my grandmother's pearls, my mother's rings, the sapphire brooch Robert gave me, all of it vanished while I was visiting my sister in September. Eleanor's voice was calm, almost conversational. When I asked my daughter-in-law where it had gone, she told me something quite remarkable. She said, "It's mine now." Eleanor, Michael stood, face flushed. This isn't the time. Sit down, Michael. The command in her voice silenced the room. You'll want to see this." She turned on the television mounted above the sideboard. The screen flickered to life, showing the interior of Ashford & Sons Jewelers. The footage played in silence. Lena, dumping Eleanor's jewelry on the counter. Lena laughing as she tried on pieces. Lena negotiating prices, her face clear and unmistakable. Then the scene changed. Now it was Eleanor's own bedroom. Lena, rifling through drawers, photographing documents. The timestamp read 3 weeks ago, 2 days after Eleanor's return from Maine. "This isn't what it looks like," Lena stammered, standing so quickly her chair toppled. "She said I could have them. She's been confused, forgetting things. Have I?" Eleanor touched her temple thoughtfully. "It's strange. The police were quite convinced I was lucid when I gave them my statement yesterday, as was Gerald Carter, my attorney, when we filed the theft report and restraining order this morning." The room erupted. Michael turned to Lena, betrayal and fury warring on his face. Margaret gasped. Patricia Henderson reached for her husband's hand. Eleanor continued, relentless now, years of quiet strength pouring forth. "I also found it interesting that someone attempted to access my financial accounts using my late husband's emergency codes that only one person had." She looked at Michael. "The police are very interested in speaking with you about that too." "Mom, I can explain. Can you explain discussing my incompetence with your wife? Planning to have me declared unfit so you could control my assets?" Her voice cracked just slightly. "Can you explain becoming someone your father wouldn't recognize?" Michael's face crumpled. Lena was already moving toward the door, but Father Morrison, no longer smiling, stepped into her path. "I think you should wait for the authorities, Mrs. Hayes," he said gently. "Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, that is." Eleanor returned to her seat, suddenly exhausted. "I've already called them. They should be here any moment." She picked up her champagne, took a small sip, and looked at her stolen ruby earring glinting in the candlelight. "Don't worry, Lena," she said softly. "I'm sure the police will understand your confusion." The doorbell rang. Eleanor stood to answer it, every inch the dignified woman she'd always been. Behind her, in the ruins of the dinner party, Lena began to cry. The police station smelled of burned coffee and bureaucracy. Eleanor sat in the victim services room, Gerald Carter beside her, as Detective Sarah Morrison, no relation to the priest, reviewed her statement one final time. "Mrs. Hayes, this is one of the most thoroughly documented cases I've seen. The footage, the appraisals, the registry, the jeweler's testimony, it's airtight." The detective closed her folder. "We've arrested Mrs. Lena Hayes on charges of grand larceny and attempted fraud. Your son is being questioned regarding the unauthorized access to your accounts. Will there be charges against Michael?" Eleanor's voice was steady, but her hands trembled in her lap. "That depends on what we find. If he only accessed the accounts but didn't transfer or steal anything, it may be a lesser charge." "But Mrs. Hayes," the detective leaned forward. "He violated your trust. That matters." "I know," Eleanor whispered. "Believe me, I know." A week later, she sat in Gerald's office again, this time with a different purpose. "I want to change my will." Gerald had expected this. He'd already prepared preliminary documents. "I've drawn up several options for you to consider." "No." Eleanor opened her own folder, revealing pages of handwritten notes. "I've already decided what I want." She'd spent 7 sleepless nights working through the details, ensuring every choice was deliberate, every consequence considered. "My son will receive nothing directly. Instead, I'm creating an irrevocable trust for my grandchildren, Emma and Joshua. The funds will be held until each child turns 25, managed by an independent trustee. The trustee will have full discretion over distributions for education, health care, and genuine needs. Nothing can be accessed by their parents." Gerald made notes. "That's wise. What about the house?" "The house will be transferred to the Sarah Hayes Foundation for Single Mothers." She smiled at Gerald's expression. named for Robert's mother, who raised him alone after his father died. The foundation will convert this house into transitional housing for women escaping domestic violence or rebuilding their lives. They'll have a safe place to land, just as I've had all my life. Eleanor, that's incredibly generous, but where will you live? I'm purchasing a smaller home in Portland, near my sister. I've already made an offer. She straightened the papers. This house has too many ghosts now, both the good kind and the bad. And your other assets? Most goes to the foundation's endowment. There's a specific bequest for Margaret Chen, who's given countless volunteer hours. Another for Patricia and David Henderson, who've been true friends. Donations to St. Catherine's and the local food bank. She paused. And a trust for Michael's therapy. Gerald looked up sharply. Therapy? $50,000, accessible only for legitimate psychological counseling. He's lost his way, Gerald. Maybe with help he can find it again. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. He's still my son. I'm furious with him. I may never forgive him. But I refuse to stop hoping he can be better. And Lena? Eleanor's expression hardened. Gets nothing. Ever. That's non-negotiable. Gerald spent the next hour reviewing every clause, every contingency. When Eleanor finally signed the new will, her signature was firm and clear. There's one more thing, she said as she prepared to leave. I want Michael to know about these changes. Not the details, but the fact that everything has shifted. He needs to understand that actions have consequences. I'll arrange a meeting. That meeting happened 3 days later, in the same conference room where Eleanor and Robert had once planned their estate together. Michael sat across from her, looking a decade older than his 45 years. He'd posted Lena's bail but moved out of their house. The divorce papers, Eleanor had heard, were already filed. Mom, he started, but Eleanor raised her hand. I'm going to speak, Michael. You're going to listen. He closed his mouth, nodded. I've changed my will. You will inherit nothing directly from me. Your children will receive trust they can't access until adulthood, managed by someone other than you. This house, and most of my assets, will go to the foundation that meant everything to your father and me. Michael's face crumpled. Mom, please, I'm not finished. Her voice softened slightly. I've also set aside money for you, for therapy, for help, because despite everything, I still see glimpses of the boy who used to build me flower crowns and promised to protect me forever. That boy didn't disappear overnight. He got lost, and I'm giving you the chance to find him again. I'm so sorry. Michael's voice broke. I don't know what happened to me. Lena, she just kept pushing, saying we deserved more, that you were wasting my inheritance. Your inheritance? Eleanor's laugh was bitter. Michael, I don't owe you my money. I don't owe you my house. I don't owe you anything except the love I've already given you for 45 years. Everything else? That's mine to do with as I choose. I know. God, I know. I got greedy and scared. Scared of not being enough, not having enough, and I let that fear turn me into someone I hate. Eleanor stood, gathering her purse. Then stop being that person. Get help. Fix yourself. If you do, genuinely do, then maybe, we can rebuild something. It won't be what we had, but it might be something true. She walked to the door, paused. I love you, Michael. I probably always will, but I don't like you very much right now. Prove to me that I can again. She left him sitting there, and she didn't look back. Spring came to Portland with a gentleness Eleanor had forgotten existed. Cherry blossoms drifted past her kitchen window as she prepared her morning tea in the small cottage she'd purchased near her sister's home. The moving boxes were finally unpacked, the walls decorated with photographs and paintings, the rooms filled with light. She was arranging tulips in a vase when the doorbell rang. Detective Morrison stood on the porch, holding a large evidence bag. Mrs. Hayes, may I come in? Of course. They sat in Eleanor's sun-drenched living room, and the detective placed the bag on the coffee table between them. We recovered your jewelry. All of it. The pieces Mrs. Lena Hayes sold have been returned by the pawn shop. They're legally required to surrender stolen goods. The items she hadn't yet sold were found in her personal storage unit. Detective Morrison opened the bag. It's all been processed and cleared. It's yours again. Eleanor reached in slowly, withdrawing the velvet bag she'd stored them in originally. The weight was familiar, comforting. She opened it carefully, her grandmother's pearls, luminous as moonlight. Her mother's engagement ring, the diamonds still catching rainbows. The sapphire brooch, the ruby earrings, now reunited, both sparkling up at her. But she noticed immediately. The wedding band is missing. My mother's wedding band. Yes. Detective Morrison consulted her notes. Mrs. Lena Hayes claims she lost it. We're still investigating, but there's a possibility she sold it through a private sale we haven't traced yet. I'm sorry. Eleanor held the pearls against her cheek, feeling their cool smoothness. It's all right, is it? Some pieces of trust, once broken, shouldn't be restored. Eleanor looked at the detective with clear eyes. The ring was special because of what it represented. My mother wore it for 61 years. She never took it off, even when her fingers swelled with arthritis. When it disappeared from her hand after she died, it was like losing her all over again. She returned the pearls to the bag. If I replaced it, I'd always know it wasn't the real one. Better to let it go. That's very philosophical. No, Eleanor said gently. It's just realistic. Some losses can't be undone. We can only choose how we carry them. Detective Morrison stood. For what it's worth, Mrs. Hayes, the way you handled this, the documentation, the courage, it was remarkable. Most people would have confronted the thief immediately, destroyed the evidence. You were smarter. I was raised to be smart, Eleanor said. It's kept me alive this long. After the detective left, Eleanor spread the jewelry across her dining table. Each piece held a story, a memory, a moment in time. She picked up the ruby earrings, the ones Lena had worn so brazenly at the dinner party, and held them to the light. They were beautiful. But they were also tainted now, carrying the weight of betrayal. Eleanor made a decision. That afternoon, she visited the Sarah Hayes Foundation's office, still in its original location, though she'd relocated. Margaret Chen greeted her with a warm hug. Eleanor, what brings you by? I have something for the auction. The foundation held an annual gala, raising funds through donated items. Several somethings, actually. She withdrew the jewelry piece by piece. The rubies, the sapphire brooch, several other items that now felt more like burdens than treasures. Eleanor, these are worth thousands. I know. That's why I'm donating them. They'll do more good raising money for the foundation than sitting in my drawer collecting dust and bad memories. She kept only the pearls and her mother's engagement ring. These two I'll keep. The rest belongs to women who need help more than I need jewelry. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. This is incredibly generous. No, Eleanor corrected gently. It's practical. Robert always said money and things are only valuable when they're in motion, when they're helping and building. Sitting in a drawer, they're just pretty rocks. That evening, Eleanor returned to her cottage as the sun set behind the hills. She made tea, settled into her favorite chair, and put on her grandmother's pearls. In the mirror across the room, she saw herself. 73 years old, still straight-backed, still sharp-eyed, still here. The phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen. She let it go to voicemail, not ready yet. Perhaps not for a while, but she listened to the message. Hi, Mom. It's me. I started therapy, like you suggested. It's hard, really hard. But I'm trying. I wanted you to know that. A long pause. I also wanted to say, I'm proud of you, for being strong, for protecting yourself. I should have been the one protecting you, and instead His voice broke. Anyway, I love you. I hope someday you can stand to hear me say that again. Eleanor saved the message. She didn't call back that night. Maybe not for many nights. But she saved it. Outside, the spring twilight deepened into purple, and the first stars emerged. Eleanor touched the pearls at her throat. 3 generations of strength, of survival, of women who bent but never broke, and smiled. She had lost a ring, a house, and for a time, her son. But she had kept the only thing that truly mattered, herself. Her dignity, her clarity, her spine of steel wrapped in silk. Lena had thought she was stealing gold. What she'd really lost was her place in a legacy she'd never understood. And Eleanor Hayes, survivor of greater losses than this, would wake tomorrow and the day after and the day after that, still standing, still here, still whole. Some treasures can't be stolen. Some women can't be broken. and some stories end not with a bang or a dramatic flourish, but with a quiet cup of tea, a string of pearls, and the deep satisfaction of knowing you won by refusing to become less than you are. Eleanor finished her tea, turned off the lights, and went to bed. Tomorrow, she'd start writing the next chapter. Tonight, she was simply powerfully enough. She thought she stole my gold, but what she really lost was her place in my heart.